Welcome to NHL Draft Pros. All right, so in this episode, we're going to talk with Hadi from Dobber Prospects, and we are going to discuss his top 10 currently. So, kind of like a mid-season rankings, I guess you could say, and some of the changes, who's gone up, who's gone down, compared to the preseason ones that we had. And there's an episode on our homepage there if you want to check that out. So, welcome again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I want to preface this by saying, before we get into the top 10, Cole Eiserman's not in it.
Oh
So
boy,
that's,
okay, so you're starting off with a bang. Yeah, you know
yep,
what? Without further ado, let's start with your number one overall pick here.
absolutely. So there's no doubt here. Macklin Celebrini's a first overall, and nothing's changed since the start of the year. He's probably on par with Jack Hughes in terms of rush creation. The approach he has to the game, the way that he paces himself in transition is fantastic. He's constantly attacking players head on. He's, just ankle breaking players in transition in the NCAA, and it's fantastic. I mean, you watch him in every shift, you feel like he's going to create something. But on top of that rush creation, he's added a whole new kind of cycle dimension to his game. He's able to retrieve pucks, to play them quickly. He's one of the fastest thinkers in this draft, and on top of it, he's a player who competes extremely hard. Even though the defensive engagement isn't all there, you can see that he's constantly thinking ahead and trying to do his best to make the best effort in order to retrieve pucks and play them up to his defensemen or that kind of stuff. So, yeah, this is a player whose compete level is off the charts. And on top of that, have some of the best skill in the draft. He's a fantastic shooter. He's a great passer. He's an amazing stick handler. And the physical game has come such a long way. He's working the boards really well. I mean, I can't really name you a weakness in this game. And that's what makes him so interesting. Is on top of being so well rounded, he has a couple of standout skills that make him really a plug and play player. You're gonna see him in the NHL very, very quickly.
I have Celebrini at number one as well. So Hattie, that's a pretty, I think, standard one across the board right now for most draft rankings. So now moving on, who do you got number two? Because this is where it kind of gets interesting. I think from like 9 to 8 to 10 is pretty much a mix up depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. My range is from 2 to 9, and you can put them in any order, and I'm fine. But I do have a slight preference. Ivan Demidov is my second overall pick, and as I mentioned in our last video, I mean he's fantastic stick handling wise. He's got a good base of defensive tools as well, and I really like his back leg wrister as well. He's able to shoot in motion fairly well. And he doesn't need a lot of space to make plays, and he can wriggle out of the weirdest scenarios with the fanciest deeks you'll ever see. He's a mesmerizing player, and I think the main concern is, you need to get him at the pro level as soon as possible, so he can learn to deke against pros, because MHL defense is I mean, it's among the worst I've seen among the high end junior league. So it's like, you want to see him kind of pick up some tools that work a bit better against pro levels. Hopefully we see that soon, but for the moment, I think the skill level and base of defensive tools is more than enough to make Demidov my second overall pick.
And like you said, yeah, he's a sicko with the puck on his stick, and we'd like to see him against a little bit higher caliber opposition, but MHL, too easy for him at this point. KHL would be nice, but unfortunately, we're not going to have that luxury, so we got to go based on what we're seeing right now. And I like Demidov a lot as well. So he's at number two for Hattie. Who do you got at number three?
Number three is my first defenseman off the board, and it's a doozy. It's Zayne Parekh, right-handed defenseman out of Saginaw. He has more goals than Easton Cowan this season, and he's a draft eligible defenseman. It makes no sense.
Wow.
He's amazing. The poise with the puck, I think, is both a high end strength and a bit of a weakness at the same time, because sometimes he doesn't realize he just needs to throw the puck out as soon as possible. But overall, I just think, a player with this level of poise, the fluid skating that he has, and the high end puck skills that he has as well. I mean, you don't score 27 goals in your draft eligible OHL season without having a booming shot. But on top of that, the playmaking game is fantastic. He can kind of read plays in advance. I think he's the smartest defenseman in this draft. Overall, just the ability to kind of predict what his teammates' routes are going to be, what his opponents are going to do, and just his kind of multi-layered thinking of the game. On top of that, he moves off the puck in the offensive zone really well. He's comfortable activating, moving at the blue line, kind of shifting his angle for a shot. He's just a fantastic creator in the OHL this year, and yeah, there's a reason I think he's top 5 in OHL scoring right now or something like that. I think it was, at last count, it was 79 points in like 50 games. It's absurd production, and the production is a symptom of what he does so well. Whereas with other players, sometimes we're racking up all these numbers, and you look at their game more in detail and you start to see a lot of warts. I think Zayne Parekh's defensive issues have been overblown. I think he's a decent defensive player. He's certainly improved over the last year. So, yeah, I mean, there's room for growth for sure, but I don't think, I've seen outlets call his defending abysmal. I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, you know what? So I've been fortunate enough to see Zayne Parekh play for 2 years now. One of my good buddies, his kid plays on Saginaw, so I go to a lot of those games.
Yeah.
His name is Sebastian Gervais. I give a little plug out to him. And yeah, so I've seen him since day one. He's definitely improved his passing game this year. Last year was more, run and gun shoot kind of defenseman, but this year I think he's got twice as many assists this year than he does goals. So he's definitely layered his game and putting up major points, like you said, for not only an OHL defenseman, but a draft eligible defenseman. This is very impressive what he's doing, and he is going to go high in this draft for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so then now we have number 4.
Yeah, so number 4 and number 5, I've been racking my head on both of these players and in which order I would take them because they're so fundamentally different, but they're both so skilled. Number 4 for me for the moment is Cayden Lindstrom out of Medicine Hat in WHL. He's a massive player. He's, I think, 6'4", 200 pounds, something like that. And the way he plays is so refined for a player's size. Usually a player this big and this skilled doesn't really need to develop these kind of high-end tools in terms of habits and all that stuff because they can just outwork and outskill and outmuscle opponents fairly easily. But Lindstrom has so many interesting, intricate details in his game. The lane switches in transition, the way that he draws players in to open up passing lanes. There are so many little habits in his game that really make him an interesting player. But overall, I think what really makes Lindstrom so interesting is actually the way that just pucks just stick to his stick. I mean, he'll jump the zone and he'll get a pass from his defenseman off the boards with his back to it, and he'll just put a stick out and the puck will stick to it. He's just got this magnetic ability that makes him really, really interesting. He's got the power game. He's got the speed in short strides, and yeah, there's just so much to like about his game. And I think, if you're looking for comparables, I think Quinton Byfield would be a very interesting one. Byfield's progression, I think, will look a lot like Cayden Lindstrom's. Lindstrom's probably going to take a couple years in order to kind of round out his game and add even more kind of projectable tools, the board game, the defensive positioning, all that. But by the end of it, I think Cayden Lindstrom, even though he might take a bit more time to break out, by year 4 or year 5, we might be looking at one of the best players from this draft.
I like that comparison too. And Byfield had one of the nicest goals, probably a goal of the year so far recently. So if you haven't seen Quinton Byfield's latest highlight reel goal, you need to go check that out.
But then at 5, I have another WHLer in Berkly Catton. And this is what makes it so tough at 4 and at 5 for me is because they're so fundamentally different, but they're so equally projectable and good, but in different ways. Catton is dynamic to all ends. I mean, this is a player who creates in transition in fantastic ways. He attacks players head on, and some of the stick handling skill really reminds me of Ivan Demidov, but I say Catton is a bit more he's a bit more simplistic in the way that he dekes, whereas Demidov just pulls out something you would have never expected any player to think of. But overall, Catton, I think the puck skills really make his game. He's a great stick handler. He's a really good passer. I really like his in-stride snapshot. It's something that really makes his game tick. And yeah, overall, he's just been fantastic for Spokane this year. And I struggle to see much of an issue with his offensive game, but the defensive game is certainly not a strength. I wouldn't call it like a bona fide element of his game. But he's still able to get in spots and make defensive plays. It's just, I don't think it's an area of his game you'll ever get to kind of a top end level at the NHL. I think he's going to be an average or below average NHL defensive player, but the level of skill that he brings to the game more than compensates for it.
Yeah, you know what? I've been a big fan of Catton for a long time. And in this kind of draft where you have, like you said, from 2 to 8 to 9 to 10, I mean, you can, mix them up a little bit like that. And I think it might be personal preference sometimes or projectability, depending on how you're looking at it. But Catton definitely is a fun player to watch and doing really good things in Spokane, like you said.
Absolutely.
So, all right, what do you got at 6 there, Hadi?
Okay, so here I have a trio of players, and this is another trio of defensemen that I've been racking my head on, just trying to figure out in which order I like them. And you can put them in any order, and I'd be fine with it. But at 6, I have Zeev Buium. He's playing in Denver right now. He's about an average-sized defenseman, but what's really impressive with Buium is he's not only an amazing offensive player where he's making these elite-level passes and doing really projectable things in the offensive zone, but he uses his defensive skating extremely well as well. I think he's a really well-rounded player in terms of both being offensively creative and defensively competent. And there's a reason he made the roster for the NTDP, for the NTDP at the World Juniors. This is a player who is already well advanced for his years. He thinks the game really, really well, and even though the skating, I mean, he's already so good at finding space laterally in the offensive zone at the blue line. I mean, he's able to shimmy through checks really well. And that's despite the fact that his edge work isn't really all the best right now. Like, it can improve beyond what it already is. And I think that's the separating factor for me between him and the two defensemen behind him is the things Buium is good at. He still has room to improve. So I think he could become one of the most elusive defensemen from the blue line in the NHL. I think there's upside for that. I'd put his upside at maybe 60, 65 points if everything works out. Like, he's got that offensive upside, but on top of that, he's amazing defensively. If you zero in on him and focus on what he does in the defensive zone, the way he closes gaps, the angles he takes to kind of check players, it's all so advanced.
Right on. Okay, so who's the next of the next 2D coming up?
So the seventh pick in my rankings is Artyom Levshunov out of Michigan State. He was 11th overall in my last rankings, but in recent games he's gotten a lot more mature, a lot more composed. And my main qualm with his game was that even though the tools are so impressive, I mean, he's a fantastic fluid skater. He's huge. He's got a great reach. I think the main issue with Levshunov early in the season is this is a player who he makes a lot of mistakes from that blue line in Michigan State, or at least he did at the start of the year. I think he's gotten a lot better at reading the game, at predicting what's going to happen, and kind of sitting back when he needs to, and not being aggressive on every single puck play. So that's been the main change for me with Levshunov, but it's really impressive because he's an amazing player on the puck. He's an extremely fluid skater with the puck or without. There's a lot of tools to work here, and I'd be surprised if he drops to 7. I'm pretty sure on draft day he'll be in the top 4. But overall, I mean, there's just so much to like about his game. I just, I still want to see some progress in terms of the decision making, in terms of the awareness. But a thing to keep in mind is this is a player who a year and a half ago was playing U18 in Belarus. Like, that's not a level that necessarily makes you think at a high level. But yeah, I mean, I think there's room for growth, and he's already shown a lot of progress. And everything I've heard about him, off the ice, this is a player who works really hard, who is constantly kind of staying an hour or two after practice to work on his skills. Like, he's a player who's trying really, really hard, and I think that'll separate him from the pack come draft day.
Awesome. I like that. And then who's the next D now? I'm interested to see who you got at number 8.
Yeah, so number 8 is Sam Dickinson out of the London Knights. I think he's the best defensive player in this draft overall. Just the defensive tools he has are fantastic. I mean, he's a really, really great skater, not just for a big guy at 6'3", 200 pounds, but just in general, he's a great skater. He closes gaps really effectively. He's got fantastic stick work. He's physical. You don't want to come up against him when you're going down the boards off the rush. You don't. It's just it's a problem for you. But yeah, overall, Sam Dickinson reminds me of Cayden in a lot of ways. A really good skater, a really big, really good skater with fantastic defensive work, and a player who can jumpstart rushes, activating to the offensive zone. I wouldn't call his offensive game a plus. Like, I'd be surprised if he hits 40 points in the NHL. But the defensive upside with him is sky high. I think he's got a floor as a second pair defenseman, and he can make a really good number 2, number 3 defenseman.
Yeah, I like Dickinson's game a lot. And I think that he's gonna go high as well in this draft. So I like Dickinson. Like you said, the last 3D that you talked about, they're gonna go high basically. All right. So then number 9, are we sticking with D, or do you got forward now?
I've got 2 forwards to close off the top 10. So number 9 is Konsta Helenius out of Finland. He plays in Jukurit in Liga right now. The production is off the charts with him this year in Liga, but Liga's another league that's dropped in terms of quality in recent years, and he's gotten opportunities in the top 6 this year in a pro level. And yeah, I mean, he's producing a lot, but I think the main thing that makes his game tick is his brain. I think he's one of the smartest, if not the smartest player in this draft. The way he thinks the game, the way he reads plays. Our Finnish scout at Dobber Prospects, she compares him a lot to Sebastian Aho. That's the main name that comes out when we think of Konsta Helenius. And
wow.
I would say that Sebastian Aho definitely has more puck skill than Helenius, but they approach the game mentally the same way. They read their opponent's routes. They cue their opponents with kind of nonverbal cues to kind of throw pucks into areas and let them know like, hey, this is where I want you. They dictate play. They dictate play off the puck really, really well. I mean, with Helenius, you're looking at a player who the puck skills aren't there. I think his puck skills across the board are average, with his passing being maybe slightly above average. But the brain is just you can't ignore that. He thinks the game so extremely well, and that even shows up in the defensive zone. He's a real three zone player as well. So I think teams are going to like that profile. Um, but I think where I have him is more or less where he's going to get drafted. Between 8 and 12 is where I predict him to go on drafting.
Perfect. I like it. So who is your last pick for the top 10 right now?
My last pick of the top 10 is Liam Greentree out of Windsor in the OHL.
He is sneaky good. People don't realize it. You have him pretty high, not like the rest of us, but I like Greentree a lot, and I'm glad you're giving him props. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, at the start of the year, I saw Greentree as more of a kind of linear shooter, a player who mainly creates offense through his goal scoring ability. And he's got a fantastic shot. It's a heavy release. He's got a good wrister, good snapper, good one timer. He's got a good arsenal of shots as well. But as the year's gone on and I've watched more and more of Greentree, you notice the hockey sense is off the charts as well. He draws players in. He creates passing opportunities for his teammates. He's able to kind of read plays in advance, place himself proactively, and kind of find these little pockets of space to work with. On top of that, he's really good defensively, and he just his playmaking game has grown so much. He's playing give and goes. He's playing towards the middle. He's finding players cross ice. And on top of that, like the details in his game are so mature. He's a player who constantly finds inside lanes, who spaces himself really well in the offensive zone to find these little pockets. There's a lot of little details in this game I really like. So overall, I think the profile as a kind of power forward winger who can surprise you with his level of intelligence is something that I really like. And with Greentree, I think that overall, I used to see him as more of a middle six upside type of guy, but recent viewings have been so good that I think there's a decent chance of him making a top line eventually. Maybe as a real complementary player, as a kind of third wheel on that top line. But I think the floor with him is a second line player. There's so much to love in his game, so many different facets in which he influences the game that you can't help but love him.
So now we're going to talk about you dropped Cole Eiserman out of the top 10 and give us the reasoning behind that, Hadi. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, like I said at the start of the video, he spec'd everything into his goal scoring game. But I do this. I'm doing this with a grain of salt. I mean, he's in the same tier as Helenius and Greentree for me, so he could go as high as 9, and I'd be personally fine with it. I just think that with Eiserman, you're really banking on his goal scoring ability translating. But overall, it's just about who's going to be the most impactful, right? I don't see Eiserman as a net positive defensive player. He's not a good playmaker. He's not the best skater either. And even though he's built like a tree stump, he's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He doesn't use it all that well. So it's a strange one with Eiserman because at the same time I look at similar players in the NTDP that had this kind of profile: Arthur Kaliev, Oliver Wahlstrom, these types of guys. They found relative success, but they're still not the most impactful players. And I think Eiserman might fall into that boat, and I don't think it's enough in order to make him a bona fide top 3 player like he is on some rankings.
Yeah, so that, you know what, Hadi, always a pleasure talking hockey with you, and I really appreciate it. And if people want to check out his YouTube, it's Hadi Kalakesh, and I have it displayed right now, and go check that out. And as always, Hadi, thank you. We'll talk soon, closer to the draft. We'll probably discuss top 16 or something like that, and see what we have on doc for that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, Hadi, take it easy, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.